The trend of ending the war in Ukraine and focusing efforts on the Indo-Pacific region is becoming increasingly evident. It is predicted that this will be the hottest area in the next 4 years. Trump's cabinet appointments also signal this shift. Scott Bessent, whom Trump selected as Treasury Secretary, stated that the world is at a point of restructuring the global trade order, considering the challenges the Trump administration will face over the next 4 years. Trump will take office at a critical moment in U.S. history, when this leading power is at its weakest position. Scott Bessent has deep knowledge of international trade and finance. He also supports cutting government spending and deficits. He harshly criticized the Biden administration's economic policies and strongly opposed its green policies. Bessent proposed a 3-3-3 economic plan for the U.S., including first, achieving an annual real growth rate of 3%. Second, the deficit should be reduced to 3% of GDP. Finally, supplementary oil production will increase by 3 million barrels per day. If the Trump administration can achieve all 3 goals, the U.S. will move closer to long-term sustainability. The individuals Trump selected for his cabinet share a perspective that views China as the U.S.'s main rival, and Bessent is no exception. He believes the yuan is undervalued, distorting the global economy by favoring Chinese exports. An expensive dollar and the lack of state support weaken U.S. industries and export capacity. Meanwhile, with its relatively cheap yuan, China continues to strengthen its global export dominance. This is a thorn in the side of Trump's MAGA agenda. Thus, Bessent's approach as the new Treasury Secretary will be to implement extremely tough trade policies. Imposing high tariffs on Chinese goods will play a key role in addressing the increasingly severe global economic imbalance. The Biden administration is leaving its successor a disastrous legacy, with a dangerous dossier that includes Gaza, Haiti, Iran, Israel, Lebanon, Russia, Syria, Ukraine, and Venezuela. Trump will face numerous foreign policy challenges when he takes office in January. However, none of the countries listed above can compare to China regarding scope, scale, and depth of its scheming. From the perspective of Trump and the Republican Party, China poses a multidimensional threat to the U.S. In the military field, China is challenging U.S. dominance in the Indo-Pacific by building air and naval forces, installing military bases on illegal artificial islands in the South China Sea, and increasingly aggressive blockade drills targeting Taiwan. In diplomacy, China strengthens its grip on many nations through debt traps, in the Belt and Road Initiative. Meanwhile, Beijing has nearly replicated the most advanced U.S. technologies, especially in advanced microchip production. Despite U.S. efforts to reduce reliance on essential Chinese goods, including minerals and critical pharmaceuticals, China remains the primary supplier of such products to the U.S. Those chosen by Trump for his cabinet strongly support the America First agenda and see countering China as the most appropriate policy. Mike Waltz, selected as National Security Advisor, Senator Marco Rubio, chosen as Secretary of State, and Scott Bessent, appointed Treasury Secretary, all back legislation addressing the growing threat from China. For instance, Mike Waltz introduced the American Critical Mineral Exploration and Innovation Act of 2020, which he described as designed to reduce U.S. dependence on foreign sources of critical minerals and bring the supply chain back from China to the U.S. Senator Rubio shares a similar stance in the legislative arena. In 2021, he authored the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, banning goods produced in forced labor camps in Xinjiang from entering the U.S. This past July, he introduced the Falun Gong Protection Act to combat forced organ harvesting, calling for sanctions against foreign individuals responsible for, complicit in, or participating in forced organ harvesting in China, mainly targeting Falun Gong practitioners. He also sponsored several laws to limit China's access to U.S. technology. Although these laws do not always receive the necessary approval from Congress, they have been successfully incorporated into other legislation. In summary, Trump will assume office in January with a toolbox of sanctions ready to deploy against China, with strong backing from his appointees. In his second term, Taiwan is expected to be the hottest topic among all the issues related to China. Notably, with Lai Ching-te elected as Taiwan's president in May, the general trend among the island's people leans toward complete independence. Meanwhile, China considers Taiwan an inseparable part of its territory and is prepared to use all measures, including force, to reclaim the island. This raises a high risk of China attacking Taiwan and drawing U.S. military intervention. As China's drills become more frequent and threatening, debates in Washington have emerged about replacing the strategic ambiguity policy with a more unambiguous stance, including a firm commitment to support Taiwan if China attacks it. President Biden also appears to support this view, repeatedly asserting that the U.S. must defend Taiwan in such scenarios. However, each time he makes such statements, his aides quickly retract them, emphasizing that the U.S. has no legal obligation to do so. The question is, how will the Trump administration approach the Taiwan issue? Strengthening arms sales and military cooperation with Taiwan is unquestionable, as he already pursued this policy in his first term. But will Trump demonstrate strategic clarity, firmly asserting that the U.S. will intervene if China attacks Taiwan, and will he approve a significant expansion of U.S. military presence in the Indo-Pacific? To answer this question, we need to examine the statements of Trump's closest advisors closely. For instance, Mike Waltz has stated that the U.S. must make it clear that we will defend Taiwan as a deterrent. To enhance this deterrence, he advocates improving the Navy's power projection capabilities in the Indo-Pacific and transferring more weapons to Taiwan. Similarly, Robert C. O'Brien, Trump's former national security advisor, wrote that the U.S. should clarify its commitment to help defend Taiwan while expanding military cooperation with the island. Trump himself has not made any such commitments. Instead, he has shown a more ambiguous, even unpredictable, stance, characteristic of his typical behavior. For example, Trump has demanded that Taiwan spend more on its defense, and expressed frustration that Taiwan has surpassed the U.S. in advanced chip manufacturing, claiming that the Taiwanese did take about 100% of our chip business. But at the same time, he also threatened to impose harsh economic measures if China enforced a blockade on the island. He stated as follows: "I would say, if you go into Taiwan, I'm sorry to do this. I'm going to tax you at 150% to 200%. He added that he would not need to threaten the use of force to prevent China's blockade, because President Xi respects me and he knows I'm expletive crazy. Such comments indicate that Trump will also face a challenging situation regarding Taiwan, just as Beijing will have to guess Trump's true intentions. Of course, believing that Trump might take reckless actions such as provoking a naval war with China, as some speculate, would be a mistake. Trump will undoubtedly increase military pressure on China, but not to the extent of leading to a conflict. A trade war, however, is beyond question. Recall that during his first term, in 2018, the Trump administration imposed a 30% tariff on imported solar panels and a 20% to 50% tariff on imported washing machines from China. 2 months later, Trump added a 25% tariff on Chinese steel imports and 10% on aluminum. Despite criticism from mainstream U.S. media regarding Trump's foreign and economic policies, President Biden chose to maintain these tariffs and even introduce new ones on electric vehicles and high-tech products. The Biden administration also banned the export of computer chips and chip-making technologies to China, aiming to slow Beijing's production progress. Given these facts, China is expected to face stringent economic pressure from the U.S. However, Trump has asserted that such pressure alone will not curb China's rise. The president-elect has clarified that on the first day of his new term, he will impose an additional 10% tariff on all imports from China, followed by more severe measures. Among these, the Trump team has announced plans to raise tariffs on Chinese imports to 60%, revoke China's permanent normal trade relations status, and ban the transit of Chinese imports through third-party countries. While Taiwan and the trade war are undoubtedly the most prominent topics, there is another equally pressing issue. How will Trump address China's increasingly assertive behavior in the South China Sea? We will analyze this topic in upcoming videos. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the following videos.